I first heard the name at 2:17 in the morning. Not my name. A completely different one. I wasn't supposed to be awake. I'd fallen asleep on the couch after watching some late-night basketball game I couldn't even remember. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up thirsty and headed toward the kitchen. That's when I heard my wife talking. Her voice drifted from the back patio through the slightly opened sliding door. Soft. Intimate. The kind of voice people use when they don't want the rest of the world to exist. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I honestly wasn't. I was halfway to the refrigerator when I heard her laugh. Then she said it. "I miss you too, Daniel." I froze. Daniel. My name is Michael. For a second, my brain refused to process it. I actually wondered if she was talking about a coworker or a relative. But then she whispered something that made my stomach drop. "No, he has no idea." Silence followed. I stood there holding the refrigerator handle, unable to breathe. We've been married for 12 years. 2 kids. A mortgage. Family vacations. Sunday breakfasts. The kind of life people point at and call stable. And yet, standing in my own kitchen, listening to my wife call another man by name, I felt like a stranger inside my own marriage. I should have walked outside immediately. I should have demanded answers. Instead, I stood there frozen, listening to the woman I loved talk to someone I had never heard of. And in that moment, something inside me quietly broke. The worst part is that, looking back now, the signs had been there for months. Maybe even years. I just kept finding explanations because I trusted her more than I trusted my own instincts. After that night, I started replaying everything. The late work meetings. The sudden habit of taking phone calls outside. The screen always turned away from me. The new passwords. The expensive perfume she started wearing even on ordinary Tuesdays. At the time, none of it seemed important. People change. Marriages evolve. That's what I told myself. We'd met when we were young and broke. We built everything together from nothing. She was the person who knew every embarrassing story about me and every fear I never told anyone else. I couldn't imagine her lying to me. A few days after hearing that name, I casually asked whether she knew anyone named Daniel. I tried to sound relaxed. She didn't even blink. "No," she said immediately. Then she smiled and asked why. That answer should have comforted me. Instead, it terrified me. Because it came too fast. Too practiced. And for the first time in 12 years, I caught myself wondering whether I actually knew my wife at all. Once doubt gets into your head, it changes everything. I hated the person I became over the next few weeks. I started noticing things I would have ignored before. She smiled at her phone more often than she smiled at me. When messages arrived, she'd glance down and immediately lock the screen. Sometimes she'd disappear into another room for 10 minutes and come back looking distracted, almost guilty. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. I wanted to be paranoid. The alternative was much worse. One Friday evening, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while taking a shower. That had become rare. Usually it never left her hand. I stared at it. For nearly a minute. I knew checking it would cross a line. But I also felt like that line had already been crossed by someone. Just maybe not by me. Then the screen lit up. A message preview appeared before it locked again. Only 6 words. "Wish I could hold you tonight." No name. No contact photo. Just the message. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might be having a heart attack. I stood there staring at the dark screen, knowing my life had just divided into 2 parts. Before that message. And after it, that message haunted me for days. I couldn't focus at work. I barely slept. Every time my wife smiled at me, I found myself wondering whether she had just been texting him. I started paying attention in ways I never had before. One evening she said she was meeting a friend from work for dinner. Nothing unusual about that. She'd done it dozens of times. But this time something felt off. Maybe it was the nervous way she checked her appearance before leaving. Maybe it was the fact that she wore the necklace I had bought her years ago, but almost never used anymore. Or maybe my instincts were finally catching up to reality. After she left, I sat in the driveway for nearly 20 minutes arguing with myself. Then I did something I never thought I would do. I followed her. Even writing those words makes me feel ashamed. I stayed several cars behind and watched her drive across town. She didn't go to a restaurant. She pulled into the parking lot of a small hotel. And then I watched a man step out of a black sedan and walk toward her. The way they embraced wasn't friendly. It wasn't casual. It looked like two people who had missed each other for a very long time. I don't remember driving home. I honestly don't. One moment I was sitting in my car, staring at them in that hotel parking lot. The next, I was parked in my own driveway with tears running down my face. I hadn't cried in years. Not when my father died. Not when I lost my job during a company downsizing. But that night completely shattered me. The image kept replaying in my head. Her arms around him. His hands on her back. The way she smiled when she looked at him. It was a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. Part of me still wanted an explanation. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. Maybe I hadn't seen what I thought I'd seen. But deep down I knew. The next morning, while she was making coffee, I looked across the kitchen and felt like I was sitting with a stranger. She talked about weekend plans. The kids' soccer practice. A movie she wanted us to watch. Normal things. Ordinary things. Meanwhile, I was carrying around a secret that felt heavy enough to crush me. And for the first time, I began wondering how many lies had been hidden inside all those ordinary conversations. I lasted 4 more days before confronting her. 4 miserable days of pretending everything was normal. Every conversation felt fake. Every kiss goodbye felt like a performance. By Tuesday night, I couldn't take it anymore. The kids were asleep upstairs. She was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone. I walked into the living room and asked a simple question. "Who is Daniel?" The color drained from her face so quickly that I got my answer before she spoke. "What?" Her voice sounded strained. "Daniel," I repeated. "The man from the hotel." For a few seconds neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. Then she set her phone down. Slowly. Carefully. As if any sudden movement might make the entire world collapse. "You followed me?" I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because I couldn't believe that was her first response. Not denial. Not confusion. Not outrage. Just fear. I asked her again. This time louder. "Who is Daniel?" Her eyes filled with tears. She looked away. And then she whispered the words I had been dreading. "It's complicated." To this day, I think those 2 words hurt more than if she had simply said yes. What followed was the longest conversation of my life. Or maybe the shortest. Time stopped making sense. She cried almost immediately. The kind of crying that comes from exhaustion rather than surprise. Like she'd been carrying something heavy for years and finally couldn't hold it anymore. At first, she insisted the affair wasn't what I thought. Then she admitted it was emotional. Then she admitted it had become physical. Every answer seemed to reveal 3 new lies. I felt like I was drowning. Finally, I asked the question that mattered most. "How long?" She covered her face with both hands. When she answered, her voice was barely audible. 8 years. 8 years. I remember standing up so fast the coffee table nearly tipped over. Our youngest child was only 9. For a horrible second, a thought entered my head that made me sick. I asked whether the children were mine. The moment the words left my mouth, she started sobbing. Real sobbing. Uncontrolled. She swore they were mine. Swore she'd never doubted that. But by then, trust was already gone. Every certainty I had built my life around was suddenly standing on broken ground. Then came the part one never saw coming. The affair itself was devastating. But it wasn't the worst secret. Not even close. After nearly an hour of tears, accusations, and questions, she finally told me who Daniel actually was. And the room seemed to tilt beneath me. They hadn't met at work. They hadn't met through friends. They had known each other long before I entered her life. Daniel was her first love. The man she had planned to marry in her 20s. The man who disappeared suddenly, according to the story she'd always told me. Except he hadn't disappeared. Her family had forced them apart. Apparently, Daniel came from a family her parents considered unacceptable. Different background. Different social class. Different expectations. Her father threatened to cut her off completely if she stayed with him. So she left. Years later, after she and I were already married, Daniel contacted her online. And instead of ignoring him, she answered. One message became dozens. Dozens became phone calls. Phone calls became secret meetings. As she explained all of this, she kept repeating the same sentence. I never stopped loving him. I don't think she realized how much that hurt. Because it wasn't just an admission of betrayal. It was an admission that, for 12 years, I had been standing in someone else's place. I wish I could say I walked out immediately. Most people probably think they would. I didn't. That's the part I'm still ashamed of. Despite everything, I loved her. Maybe I still did because the truth hadn't fully settled in yet. Or maybe 12 years of marriage can't be erased in a single night. For weeks, we lived in a strange limbo. Some days we screamed at each other. Other days we sat in silence. A few times we even cried together. She insisted she loved me too. That somehow made everything worse. I couldn't understand how someone could love two people at the same time for nearly a decade. She said she had tried to end things with Daniel several times. She claimed she wanted to save our family. But every time he came back, she answered. Every time. Meanwhile, I became obsessed with details. I wanted timelines. Dates. Messages. The complete truth. But the more information I uncovered, the more damaged I felt. Each new fact was another cut. Another reminder that while I thought we were building a life together, part of her heart had always belonged somewhere else. And no amount of explanations could change that reality. The situation exploded beyond our marriage sooner than either of us expected. Secrets have a way of spreading once they crack open. My sister noticed something was wrong first. Then her mother started asking questions. Soon both families knew we were having serious problems. Nobody knew the full story at first. But people talk. And eventually the truth came out. The reactions were brutal. My mother was furious. Her father, ironically, suddenly acted devastated by the consequences of decisions he'd made decades earlier. My friends wanted me to leave immediately. Some called me weak for even considering staying. Others said I should think about the children first. Everyone had an opinion. Very few understood what it felt like to be living inside it. The hardest conversations were with the kids. We didn't tell them about the affair. They were too young. But children notice everything. They notice separate bedrooms. They notice the tension. They noticed that their parents stopped laughing together. One night my son asked whether we were getting divorced. I remember looking at him and feeling physically sick. Because I didn't know the answer. For the first time in my life, I couldn't see a path forward. Only a mess that seemed to grow larger every day. The next few months were the darkest period of my life. I stopped sleeping properly. When I did fall asleep, I woke up replaying conversations in my head. Every memory became suspicious. Every anniversary. Every vacation. Every family photo. I kept wondering whether she had been thinking about him while standing next to me. The questions never stopped. Neither did the anger. Some mornings I hated her. Other mornings I missed her even when she was sitting in the next room. That confusion was torture. I started seeing a therapist because I could barely function at work anymore. My concentration disappeared. I lost weight. Friends told me I looked exhausted. They were right. One session stands out in my memory. The therapist asked me a simple question. Are you grieving the marriage you had, or the marriage you thought you had? I couldn't answer. Because I realized those might be two different things. The marriage I thought I had was built on trust, partnership, honesty. The marriage I actually had included 8 years of deception hidden behind ordinary days. That realization broke something deep inside me. Not just my trust in her. My trust in my own judgment. About 6 months after the confrontation, I met Daniel. Not by accident. I asked for it. I needed to see him with my own eyes. For weeks, my imagination had turned him into something larger than life. Some perfect man who had stolen my wife because he was better than me. Smarter. More successful. More interesting. The reality was different. He was just a man. A tired-looking man in his 40s sitting across from me in a quiet cafe. Neither of us seemed comfortable being there. The conversation was awkward from the start. He admitted he knew she was married. He admitted he should have walked away years earlier. But he also admitted something that stayed with me. I thought she would eventually choose. As if my marriage had been some long-running competition I never knew I was participating in. I wanted to hate him completely. Part of me did. But another part realized he wasn't the only person responsible. He hadn't made vows to me. She had. When we finally stood to leave, he looked genuinely ashamed. Yet that didn't make me feel better. Nothing could undo what had already happened. Nothing could give me back the years that now felt contaminated by doubt. A year after everything came out, my wife moved into an apartment across town. By then, the marriage existed mostly on paper. We had tried counseling. Long conversations. Temporary separations. Rules. Promises. Every possible attempt to rebuild trust. But trust isn't a wall you repair with fresh paint. Once the foundation cracks, the entire structure becomes unstable. The final decision wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming. No shattered dishes. No last betrayal. Just exhaustion. We sat at our kitchen table one evening and admitted what neither of us wanted to say aloud. We couldn't go back. She cried. I cried too. Not because I thought we still had a future. Because I was mourning the future I had imagined for so many years. Telling the children was worse than any argument we ever had. Their confusion and heartbreak cut deeper than my own. I still remember my daughter asking whether we would ever live together again. Neither of us could answer immediately. Those few seconds of silence felt unbearable. When my wife finally moved out, the house became painfully quiet. For months, I kept expecting to hear her footsteps in the hallway. Then I'd remember. And the emptiness would hit all over again. It's been 3 years now. People assume time heals everything. I don't think that's true. Time changes wounds. It doesn't erase them. These days, my ex-wife and I are civil with each other. We co-parent. We attend school events. We sit on opposite sides of soccer fields pretending everything is normal for the kids. Most of the time, we manage. Sometimes we even laugh about something the children do. Then I catch myself remembering what happened, and the distance returns. I've heard she's still involved with Daniel. Oddly enough, that information doesn't hurt the way it once would have. What hurts is something else. The uncertainty. I still don't know which memories were real and which were built on lies. When I look through old photos, I sometimes wonder what she was feeling in those moments. Was she happy? Was she pretending? Was she wishing she were somewhere else? Those questions have no answers. I've stopped looking for them. At least I try to. The truth is that betrayal changes how you see the past. It rewrites events you thought were settled and turns certainty into speculation. And that kind of damage lingers long after the relationship itself ends. What stays with me most isn't the affair. Not the hotel. Not the lies. Not even Daniel. It's that moment in the kitchen at 2:17 in the morning. The moment I heard my wife say another man's name. Looking back, I think my life changed before I even understood what I was hearing. People often ask whether I regret confronting her. I don't. The truth hurt more than anything I've ever experienced, but living inside a lie would have hurt even longer. What I do regret is how easily I ignored my instincts. How many times I dismissed uncomfortable feelings because trust seemed easier than doubt. Maybe that's unfair to myself. Maybe loving someone always requires a certain amount of blindness. I don't know. What I do know is that betrayal doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in small moments. Missed signs. Half-truths. Tiny choices repeated over years. Then one day everything collapses. I still think about that night sometimes. I still hear her voice in my head. I miss you too, Daniel. Those 4 words ended a marriage, changed a family, and reshaped my understanding of love. And even now, years later, part of me is still standing in that kitchen, listening.